But let's go ahead and get started with the demo. So I already said hi and thank you for being here. I'll say that one more time after I'm done. And if I don't, kick me out. I'll try to be nice to you guys. What we're going to do today is we're going to make a box, and boxes are pretty fun. This one has a couple of little surprise elements to it. The top is a spin top, and the nice thing about this is the unique thing about this is the spin bearing, or the part of the spin top that spins on the platform or ground or whatever, is made up of a coin. So this is a US penny, and we'll talk about the legality of that in a little bit. Right? You guys aren't going to jail for me, I promise. Yeah. Scratch that. I just lied. No, I'm kidding. It's all good. So it's a coin that we're going to hammer. I'll show you how to shape it and inset it inside the bottom of this lid. And then if everything goes right, the bottom of this box, and this is kind of a smaller one, has a concave foot, so we can spin the top around. I'll just chalk that up to the haze in the air right now. We can spin it on the bottom, and it'll come to rest and won't fall on the ground unless you fumble the spin. But it's pretty fun. Spin tops are great, and like I said, I like to make things that people can play with and touch and have fun with, and this is just another version of one of those things. I'll pass this one around, and this other one, so you guys can kind of see what's going on. I think this one has a dime instead of a US penny. If you note, there's a little snapped off finial in here. That's why I have a brown collar on this one. It wasn't planned, but I like to keep it around because it's fun to look at. And if you see any tear out or anything, those are demo boxes, and don't say anything because it never happened. I'm just kidding. So we're going to make one of those today. I have cherry, and I have some Bacardi I think we'll use for the little spin top stem. I'm going to call it a finial. You can, if you're talking about it in a spin context, we'll call it a spin stem. Terminology is whatever. I will say a couple things. When I'm demonstrating, I don't like to sand, so I don't really worry about getting like a nice flawless finish. You guys can all sand. We can all do the old 60 grit gouge thing and get a nice surface if you wanted to. Hopefully you don't rely on that. It's not fun. So I won't sand. It's also not nice having dust flying around in a confined space without extraction. I also try to speak to the general audience, and what I mean by that is there are going to be a lot of things that I say that most of you or some of you are like, duh, why is he talking about this? Everybody knows that. But that's not true. Everybody doesn't know that. Somebody just said people got their first lathe for free recently, and that is super cool. So try to present a project so that anyone, regardless of experience, can go make this. I'll use basic tools and talk about what I'm doing as I'm turning it. And if you have any questions at any point, feel free to just shout it out. If I don't see you, raise your hand. Just say, hey, you. You don't even have to remember my name is Michael. It's all good. I'm a teacher by trade. I get enough crap from my students, so you guys are probably better than that. I love my students, though. If they see this, they're all very good. I teach at a community college in Chattanooga, biology and anatomy and physiology and things in that realm. Yeah, but it's a heck of a lot more fun teaching wood turning, though. I'll say that. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to use safety goggles partly because packing to fly across the country for these things, and there's a workshop tomorrow. It is limited space, and I'm trying to save the club some money, so I didn't pack my face shield. And I know they're here, so this is just an excuse. But this is something that's a pretty benign, safe project. It's small. It's mostly between centers, and it's spindle work. So I feel pretty comfortable using safety glasses. If it was something a little bit different, I have no problem borrowing a face shield. So just be safe when you're turning. There are more things to think about than just wearing a face shield, but safety is key. Like, you should have fun when you're turning, and you should try to do your best, and you should be safe. Those are the 3 rules. That's it, in my opinion, right? We're going to start out with this cherry, and I've got this rounded already, and I rounded this today, so it's running pretty true. But we'll use this for a jam chuck and the body of the box and the lid of the box. And I like turning boxes. I don't turn them all the time. I wouldn't call myself a box turner, but I wouldn't really call myself a blank turner anyway. They're just really fun to make. I will say, though, that every time I make a box, I feel like I should start calling myself a box turner because they're so fun. It's so satisfying to get a good fit, right? So I just scribed a couple of marks for my pencil, with my pencil. I'm indicating that this is gonna be the lid section up here. We're gonna put a tenon on this side and a tenon on this side for the jam chuck. So I'll part off the lid. We'll work on the body first. We'll get the general shape. I'll hollow it out, and then we'll set it aside while it's still connected to what will be the jam chuck. Then we'll work on the lid, do the magic with the coin, and then we'll finish it off by finishing the bottom of the box, and hopefully we have something that spins without falling on the ground. We'll see. Does it work at the very end? We'll see. Right. So we've got this. I'll start out by just parting this off. I'll turn up my speed a little bit. If it matters to you, what I'm seeing on the so it's speedometer, the reader is 1,400 RPMs or so. And I remember when I first started turning, and this is going to be one of those things that it's like, sure, duh, we all know this. But when I first started turning, I learned from YouTube and Instagram, and it was like the best teacher in hindsight, not really, in the world. But I would see people use their parting tools, like these nice scrapers, and they would stick it in this log and part off their blank. So I didn't know anything better. So I was working with this piece of green wood. It was like the biggest thing that I turned at the time, and it probably wasn't that big. And I just stuck my parting tool in, straight on. It binded up at me, flung at my face, and thankfully I was wearing a face shield then. But still, to this day, like the most terrifying thing that happened on the lathe was getting a parting tool stuck in my face. So I say that to say that if you're just starting out, one thing that's nice to do with a parting tool is make a really wide kerf so that doesn't happen to you. Also, you can see that I'm following the surface with my parting tool, so it's more of a peeling cut than a scrape if I was just going straight in. Right, and that just helps everything stay pretty clean. Once I get down to the bottom, right, I like to just wiggle my parting tool around, and then it gets pretty close where we can just slow the lathe off or slow the lathe down and just twist this free. So we'll set. I should have made my tenon first, but we'll go back and do that in just a little bit. Yeah. But this is our lid. I have these gremlins that follow me around from my home, and they're in my shop too. And whenever I set something down, they take it and put it elsewhere. So if I look like I'm scrambling to find my lid, you guys know where it's at. It's on this table right now. So if I can't find it, it's your fault, not mine. And it's not those gremlins anymore. So like I said, I wanted to make a tenon, and I just had a brain fart. So we'll make a tenon right here, and then we'll make a separate one when we get to the lid. After that, no big deal. All right, so it's not running totally true, no big deal. All right, we'll just true it up. And we don't really need to focus on that too much. We're making a tenon to chuck this up anyway. When we are turning a tenon, you can size it in a lot of different ways. You can eye it. Sometimes I don't trust myself, so a lot of times I will, even if in my own shop, I'll use some calipers to size my tenon. I'm using standard chuck jaws, and thank you to Margaret for letting me borrow her chuck. I didn't forget my chuck. I was above my weight limit, so I had to leave one thing behind, and I left my 7-pound Axminster chuck behind because I figured if the one thing that I had to leave behind that it could find was a chuck. So I'm borrowing her chuck, and big shout out for her to graciously let me borrow it from her. But we'll set these at about 55 millimeters, which is just over 2 inches, about 2¼ inch. And I'll just quickly size my tenon on my headstock side. And when I'm doing this, I'm just touching these internal jaw, the point on this jaw that's closest to me, and lining it up with what I'm scribing on the other side. So if you haven't done this before, it's one of these things that can be really unnerving because you're sticking something pointing in a spinning piece of wood on the end grain side especially, but it is really safe if you just focus on touching the point closest to you and not both points. If you do, then you have calipers flying at you, and that's, maybe worse than a parting tool, right? So I have my tenon sized, and I'll just use a skew to quickly cut that tenon, and then we will, that's not a skew. Let's see. Well, I have one right here. Oh, there it is. I'll cut this and I'll chuck this up, and we can start working on the shape of the body. Right. Tenons don't have to be very deep. right? So this is maybe just a little bit over 1/4 inch. The one thing that they do have to have is a flat shoulder. So I want the top of my tenon to fit squarely on the top of my chuck jaws. That's the thing that keeps your tenon stable, not just having a tenon that's not touching the bottom or having the correct angle, like they're dovetailed or fish beaked, right? You want a flat 90-degree, it's like 180 if you're looking straight across, a plane to rest on your chuck jaws, and that keeps it from shifting in your jaw. So we've got our tenon made. We'll chuck this up, and then we'll start working on the body and shape it out, hollow it, and then move on to the lid, which is still right here, promise you. All right. So this is a nice Vic Mark chuck that I'm borrowing again from Margaret. Thank you very much. Whenever I've done quite a few demos, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but it's kind of inevitable that you'll forget something. Not all the time, but if you forget something, if I forget something, not you guys, you're probably a little bit better than me. If I forget something, it's not a huge surprise. Well, I didn't really forget many things this time. I did forget my calipers, right? So I forgot those. Thankfully, we're meeting at a Woodcraft, and there are plenty of calipers around. So thank you. If anybody here works at Woodcraft or is the person that's letting me borrow those, I appreciate that very much. I also forgot a sock, which is kind of a strange thing to forget. But yeah, besides that, I've went to a demo and forgot a chuck before. So if I forgot a pair of calipers and a sock, then that's not as bad as forgetting a chuck, right? So we're already ahead of the game. So we've got this chucked up, and we don't need our tail sock for now. So we've got this mark that we already made that's going to indicate our jam chuck. And it's not crucial to make this, but having a visual reference that tells me where the bottom of the box is gives me an idea of the form that I'm going to make before I actually start turning it. Right? If I didn't have this here, it's kind of in limbo how tall I want to make this form or what. By setting a pencil mark, like it's just a constraint that I can use that makes it a little bit quicker, I think, to come to that final form. So for this, we're going to make this box that is just a tapered, like nice tapered cone, and it'll be relatively thin at the bottom. So if I were to make the complete form of the box right now and had this really thin foot, hollowing this out would be problematic. I would get a lot of movement, and there would be the potential for this, because it's all just these grains are running, this grain is running parallel, potential for this to snap off. So what I usually do is I'll still peel this to a point that's something like this. It's a little bit thicker than what I want the bottom to be, right? But again, setting this cut up gives me a visual reference for how far I want to, or how tall I want to make this box. And what I'm doing now is I'm just making like a stepped version of my box. With wood turning, there are, what's the joke? Ask 4 wood turners how to do something, you'll get 5 answers. There are so many different ways to do the same thing. And I find that if you're making a relatively simple form, like this tapered box is, it's a lot easier to come to that form by cutting corners than if I were to try to make this smooth curve, even just making curves and then blending the curves. If I just make this stepped version, again, it gives me a reference for the size and the width of my box. I'm going to decrease the diameter just a little bit. But it's all just simple rudimentary turning. I'm just making these peeling cuts, and now I have something that's really fast and easy to just cut corners off. And even if you're like me, you're not that great with a skew, right? Having to just cut corners makes it relatively quick and painless to get a nice, nice form. Again, like anything wood turning, you can do this in many different ways. A little bit of a bigger skew is going to give me a better tool finish on this, right? So I've got this nice cone that we're turning, right? And we'll leave it like this for now. With the skew, like I see a couple little bumps there, and again, I'm not super concerned with getting the best finish here, but I do want to make something that's decent. Nice thing about a skew, it's essentially a negative rake scraper. If you hold it at an angle, it functions like that. So if you have these little bumps and divots, you can just run this along and smooth everything else. You might mess up your surface a little bit, but not a big deal, right? So, you don't have to do that, but it's just, skews are something that's are really versatile, right? And they're also super fun to use, right? So if you're not that comfortable, it's worth the effort of practicing. So we've got our box shape right here. Yes, sir.
How can a negative right stroke possibly mess up the surface?
Oh, well, because, yeah, right. That is funny, though, because this skew that I was using is old tool steel, and I probably don't really have a sharp edge as little as I turned it. So, yeah, that's my excuse. It's the tool, not me. I'm just kidding. So with this, we've got our basic form. Now I just want to face off this surface so it's smooth before we start hollowing it out and making a little shoulder on the inside for our spin top lid to sit in. So I've got a 1/2-inch spindle gouge that I like to grind pretty aggressively. It doesn't really matter in this case, but it's just nice and sharp and has an acute angle and gives me a pretty nice cut across this end grain, right? So here, it's smooth. I'm not so concerned about this interior surface quality because that's all going to be hollowed away. So I just want to make sure that what I have on the very edge right here is nice. So I'll go back, move really, really, really slowly, and now I have something that's a pretty good surface. Everything else that's not as good of a surface is going to be gone anyway. So it's just like efficient to just quickly do this. Otherwise, I would move a heck of a lot slower, and it's like once you get to the center, what is it? You think about pushing the tool, and that's fast enough to cut the fibers. So we've got this shape. Let's start hollowing it out. This is end grain, so again, there are many ways to do this. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just use my spindle gouge and plunge in to get a pilot hole, but I already have this 1/4-inch drill bit set up right here. So let's just drill a hole. And the reason that it's nice to drill a pilot hole like this, if you haven't done much work with end grain is awesome. It's great. So you get a lot of benefits with a box being end grain. Especially somebody asked, going from Chattanooga to Denver, was there any movement in the box? Well, if there was, the lid and the box move in the same way, so it doesn't really affect the fit much. But with end grain, you need to consider how you're going to cut in terms of supported fibers. So here we're just going to pull from the inside out, and it's a lot easier to start that cut if you have a pilot hole. Right, so obviously we don't want to just drill as deep as this drill bit goes because we're going to make a funnel today, and it's more embarrassing to make a funnel with a box than it is with a bull. I don't really care too much about that, but I try not to make funnels during demos. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to imagine where the bottom of this box is, and you can see, I don't know if you can see very clearly, there's a tiny little hump right here, but that's where I'm going to continue this nice curve down to make a smaller foot that'll probably end right around here or so. This is my, I made this line right here, but I think the curve will be nice if I end my foot right there. It's not going to be so tiny, it'll be unstable. So if I drill past that point, I'm going to have a funnel. I just want to pull that back and let's say give myself about a 1/2 inch of material between the end of this drill bit and this line right here. Remember, the top of my box is concave, so I need to consider how much material I'm going to remove there while I'm drilling as well. So let's say if I just make a reference line on this blue painter's tape, I'll use my pencil to make a mark right here. You guys have seen the price of blue painter's tape, right? So I've been using this piece for about a year, saving myself money. Last time I went to go buy blue tape, it had been a while, and I was shocked. It was like a roll like this. If you're buying a single roll, it was like, oh my gosh, like $6 now, $7, astronomical. So I bought a big pack, and I try to use my pencil on existing tape right here. But certainly you could put a piece of tape there. That's just a half joke, right? I always treat myself to a new roll of tape after a demo, so it's great. So I've got my drill marked. I know I'm not going to drill deep enough. I know I'm going to give myself enough room to make a concave bottom, and so I'm just going to drill. Keep your speed down. If you haven't had much experience drilling on the lathe, what is the worst thing you can do to your drill bit if you're trying to drill into a hole efficiently? Yeah, get it hot, right? And so if I plunge this drill bit in really quickly or at high speed, it's going to heat this bit up quite a bit. It's going to dull my drill bit. It's not going to cut well. It might bind if this was greenwood. So I'll keep my speed at around 500 to 600 RPMs. The bigger the bit, the flatter the face, like a Forstner bit, you might want to slow it down a bit. And then we'll just, when I was facing off that surface, I put a little divot in. I didn't mention that, but with my spindle gouge, I put a little divot so this just standard drill bit seats in that divot. And for the first centimeter, I like to go really, really slow. And what that's doing for me is creating a nice cylinder that tracks on my drill bit. If I put this in really quickly, especially this being end grain, imagine this bundle of straws, you're cutting some of them, but you're also moving them out of the way. If you go in really quickly, you're going to move these straws out in a non-radially symmetrical way, so your drill bit will get off. And if it's off at the first centimeter, it's going to be really off when you get down here. So it behooves you to go slow until you have about a centimeter or so of drill bit sunk in, and then you can go a little bit faster. You hear that chatter, that little mark? Clear your chips out, right? Blow a little bit. Like not wearing a face shield for this context, so many times I'll blow with my face shield and like, why isn't the chip? Oh, okay, yeah. So do that, and then I'll just plunge this down a little bit more, pull it out, clear off that little chip, and then one more will get us to our pencil mark. Now I'm just looking at the rim right here. Oh, that's really annoying. Right. And I'm drilling until I see rim, pencil mark, rim. That's how I know I'm deep enough. And since we took the time to carefully measure, sort of measure everything, relative measurements, I know I have a pilot hole that's not too deep, and it's going to give me some good meat. Another thing why I like to add like a 1/2 inch plus of material to the bottom of this is going to be a box with a relatively small foot. If it was really thin on the bottom, that'll make it kind of top heavy and it'll be unstable, right? So you don't want that. You can make something that's delicate, but try to have like a little bit of ballast on the bottom if it's delicate, right? So we've got our pilot hole drilled. I'll put this over here, and let's start hollowing out our box. Hollowing tools. A lot of people make them, a lot of different ways to do the same thing. If you don't have, if you're just starting out, you don't have a whole lot of tools, bowl gouge is, one of the more versatile things you can have. And you can use a bowl gouge to just hollow end grain pretty easily as long as you cut in a supported manner, right? So I can take this 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and if my flute is pointing up to the ceiling, that's completely open. If the flute is pointing to me, that's closed. Or we could say like 12 o'clock is open, 9 o'clock is closed. I'll open this to about 45 degrees or so, or to where it's at like 10:30, right? So that's kind of open. It's open enough to cut efficiently, right? And all I'm doing is pulling toward myself. When I get close to my rim, right, and I don't want to get a catch, right, certainly I'm not going to open up my bowl gouge. But if you're worried about that, you can just close, right, and you just basically go into scraper mode and you're not going to catch anything. Now right here, I've got a wall thickness that is about twice as what I want right now, so it's maybe 3/16 of an inch or so. And I'm going to cut this down to about 1/8 of an inch, right? Something like that. And what I started to do was make a little shoulder that's going to be the inset for my top. And so I can, you can clean this up however I want, but I'll just take that 1/2 inch skew. And I want to make sure that this wall is 90 degrees, right? So I have, a shoulder that's flat horizontal like this. My wall is like this, so I create this 90-degree angle. So if you're really worried about that, you can always lay the edge of your skew against the box, right? The side of my skew, and if it's parallel with the ways, it's going to be flat. And I'll just roll this over a little bit to flatten out my bottom. So now I have a nice shoulder that's going to capture my spin top. I've got a nice lip. The reason I'm doing that now is if I hollowed my box and went back to the top, I'm going to get a lot of chatter and maybe a lot of weird noises that you guys don't want to hear. They'd be even worse than the drill bit, probably, right? So we've got this. We have, we've got our lip, everything. Let's hollow the rest of it. We can go back to our bull gouge and can move up the speed a little bit. We're a little bit below 1600. And just pull, right? So I'm going from the center, my pilot hole, I'm just pulling toward myself. My flute's about halfway open, right? If I open it more, I get a more aggressive cut. If I close, I don't cut anything. If I roll it all the way upside down, I'm not cutting anything, right? So you need to find that happy median with how much material you want to remove, how clean of a surface you want to get. All right, if you have a completely open bull gouge, you're going to remove a lot of material, but the surface quality is probably not going to be that great, right? So we can just keep going like this. And when I get close to the wall, like I said, I tend to roll that in a closed position so I don't catch it all. And I can just keep it closed. I can lift my tool handle up, and I go into scraper mode, right? And it's just really, say safe, not that it's dangerous. It's really not prone to catching, right, doing that, right? So you can keep doing that, and it's really fast and easy to hog out material in a little end grain box with a bull gouge, right? You don't have to have like a carbide scraper or cupped carbide or you don't have to have a spindle gouge or hook tool or termite tool or whatever. You can do most everything, in this case with a bull gouge. But sometimes it might be a little squirrely, so you can take another bull gouge, just a smaller. This is a 3/8 bull gouge, and do the same thing if you want to maybe get a little bit of a keener surface on the inside, right? So you can hear that chatter, that really loud noise. That's what I was trying to save you from without coming back to the lip later, right? And then you just do this until you're at the bottom and you meet the bottom of that pilot hole. And you can sort of feel, you can sort of see, but you can feel if there are any bumps left. Right, so you can just like shave back and forth and get a pretty nice surface. You can feel with your finger, and you shouldn't stick your finger into a moving object, but it's relatively curved and pretty safe right here. It's pretty open. Right? You can always, if you're concerned with the finish on the inside, that's not too bad, but you can use something like a little right-hand curve scraper. With these, if you don't have a negative rake, right, this is just a flat scraper, what you can do to increase your quality is just like instead of keeping this horizontal and scraping like this, just put it on its edge. So now you have more of a shearing cut. And so I can go in, if I wanted to hog out material, I'll keep this horizontal. Go in, pull it, and that's going to get rid of a lot. It's like my open bull gouge. But if I want to get a nice finishing cut, like a nice finishing surface, I'll just put it on tilt, and that'll shear scrape everything. And if you have a nice fresh burr, you're kind of peeling off a little bit of a layer, right? One thing you need to think about, though, is if you do have this at this 45-degree angle, right, use a light touch because you're only touching the tool rest with a little bit of tool material, right? But just doing that, you can get a pretty nice surface. I didn't need like fancy tools, and it's not too bad. I could spend a little bit more time and smooth out a little bit, but the surface quality is pretty decent. So now we have our box hollowed, right? And what I'm going to do before I move on to my lid is I'll just complete this profile a little bit more. And the reason I want to do that is I want to sort of get as close as I can to the final form of this box so I can kind of check everything, make sure it looks as good as I want to. I'm in mental box body mode, and when I move on to the lid, I get into lid mode. But also having this complete as much as I want, we'll use our bull gouge for this. Why not? What I like to do is make my foot as thin as possible. Not as thin as possible, as thin as it's going to be, right? And with that, when you turn this box or turn this box around and jam check it, it's almost never going to run 100% true. You'll have a little bit of wobble. So if I have my foot down to the smallest diameter it's going to be, what I can do is when I turn this around and put it in my jam chuck, I can part it off right at the bottom, so I don't have to worry about blending anything on the the last inch or so of the bottom of my box. And it's really not that bad if you're using sandpaper or something, right? Because sandpaper is, what's its ultimate function? It is a blending tool, right? But you'll have like just a difference in surface quality, right? So we've got that. I'm happy with that being the smallest I'm going to make it, and I left a little bit of a lip right there. You can make a little V groove if you want to, just to give yourself a reminder that when we part this off, right? I'll just part off this extra material right here, and it'll be really easy to finish that, right? So now we're done with this, and look at this. Look at this big jam chuck we have. Like, you guys don't have a box, like a paper bag full of jam chucks that you'll use for years, right? Well, this is an A+ jam chuck. Look at all that material. Like, that's great. I love those, right? So now let's get into lid mode. We've got this pretty much done. We'll focus on turning our lid. We need to make a tenon because I did skip that step on accident. Yeah, but we'll do that pretty quickly. I'll just, let's see, we'll take this out and take off my chuck. Well, let's see. We won't use this for very long, so we can just stick this in, right? I don't usually like to do this. It's, it's stable enough and it's nothing dangerous about it, but we're just using it for just a second, and what I'm gonna do is I will get my life center up. Now I want to keep the same orientation that I had, right? So this was how my blank was, like this, and this is how my lid was, right here. You can see I've got this registration mark for my live center, right? So I will put this on, right? Where my live center attached, or my live center pressed in and made a dent, and then I'll just try to keep this as true as possible. That way I have, the best chance of getting a nice grain match, right? This, I might need a little bit of that's not too bad, right? So we can just tighten this up. We'll make a tenon really quickly on this side, flip it around in the chuck, and then talk about our lid. Right. Let's see. There we go. All right, same sort of thing. We'll just make a tenon that is, about 1/4 inch deep or so. So for this, I could use my calipers, a nice trick of the trade. If you have like a robust or a one-way, Life Center Nova system, if you have like 50 millimeter jaws, you can just take a pencil, lay it. This is a fat. I don't know where this came from. It's a Home Depot, really, really nice round construction pencil. But you can lay your pencil down and just put it on the wood that's spinning. And now I have a tenon that's about 50 millimeters. So like, you don't even have to trust your mind. As long as you have a spare pencil around in a Life Center, just lay your pencil on top and that's going to be a pretty good sized tenon. That was one of those like, oh my gosh, you can do that things when I learned about it, and now I just use it all the time. Right, if you have a smaller center though, do the same thing and it doesn't work. I said you have to have one of these types of live centers, right? So now we can just make our tenon, right? Make sure that we have a nice square shoulder. All right, angle is pretty good, right? And then we will check this up. Let's see, there it is. So for the lid, right, it's a spin top, and it does have the coin-bearing gimmick in it. So we want to think about the shape of this spin top. If it was a classical spin top, you'd have something that was like a nice cone shape or a nice round shape where the stem was pretty far up, and that spin bearing was quite a distance away from the medium point of the top. With this, and having something that's like not the best bearing surface, high-end tops will have like a gemstone, like a ruby or something, or a metal ball bearing. Here we have a coin that's not going to spin that well, comparatively speaking, to like something that's higher quality. So what we want to do to ensure that we have the best chance of it spinning and staying on the top of the top of our bottom of our box, that's a phrase, right? Is keep the center of gravity pretty low, right? So I want this to be a relatively shallow bottom. If you looked at those examples that I passed around, there's just basically a little OG curve, right, instead of a big curve. So I can take my spindle gouge, and we'll true this up really quickly right here. Take my spindle gouge, I'll face off this surface. And for this top, right, I've got a box that has, pretty close to a 90-degree shoulder and lip on it. So I want to make sure that the outside of my top is about 90 degrees, so it'll sit flat, right? So I'll take my spindle gouge, just make a cut that's perpendicular to my waves, my ways, not my waves. Again, it's the haze outside. That's doing it to me, right? And as we approach the interior, we'll just make this little OG curve, like we're making a miniature backside to an elegant platter. OG meaning we have this curve that starts in and it recurves back like this shallow S shaped, right? So the rim, if we call this the rim of our spin top, is flat. I can take my spindle gouge, open it up a little bit, start moving, have that inflection point. You can close it again, slow down my speed. All right, as I get to the middle, we're not so concerned about surface quality because we're gonna cut that away in just a second, right? But we want to make sure that we have this shape. We can use our spindle gouge as like a little scraper tool and have something that is just elevated enough to keep our coin bearing from sinking in, right? And once we add the coin, this will be a nice, nice shaped spin top. All right, so we don't have an amazing surface right now, so we can take our scraper, turn it on its side, and scrape a little bit of ways away, and you get those nice little delicate shavings, right, that are so great to just look at. Right, so now we've got this. Now we need to think about our coin. Right, so we can't just stick a flat coin in here, as you can't spin on a flat coin. So we need to shape the flat coin into a dome shape. We need to dome the coin. So this is what I was talking about with currency. Any coin enthusiasts in here? Anybody that like a numismatologist? What's the coin term? Yeah, that's right, that one. So if anyone is, or if you just happen to know this, what year did, let's say, U.S. pennies go from like solid construction to plated construction? 1982, 1981, 82. So if I have a penny, and I'll pass this around, you can see what I'm talking about. If I have a penny that is plated, like has a zinc core and then thin copper plating, and I try to shape that with, we'll use a doming block, which is just a metal sphere with these concavities in it. If I try to shape that, then a lot of times what will happen is that penny will start splitting on the seams where they stamp the shape. But if I use a penny like this one, 1969, something like that, that is solid construction. It's not solid copper, but it's this alloy that's solid, it's not plated. And I shape that, it's not gonna break on a seam where that thin copper is. Now the thing with the legality of this, that was just a total joke. If I'm defacing currency, like we're doing it for the sake of making something cool, but there's nothing illegal about that. If I was trying to deface it for the sake of like counterfeiting or passing it off as another type of currency, that would be illegal. So don't go into a gas station and try to pay with one of these tops. That might be blurring the line. But there's nothing wrong with this. This is just a fun thing to do with pennies that are kind of becoming obsolete anyway. You can also hammer some nickels or dimes. Pennies are a nice medium size. They're a nice thickness so that they don't get too thin. And with something like a dime, if you drop that domed dime, it's really thin. Drop it on the ground, it's going to dent. Whereas a penny probably won't do that. So the way that we get this shaped is I bought a, you guys have Harbor Freights out here, right? High quality tools all the time, yeah. All right, that's also another joke, but very good prices. But I will say that I bought this doming block set. I just brought a few punches right here. they're really heavy, and I didn't want to. If I had to take my chuck out, I'm going to take out some of my punches. But I bought this for like $30 at Harbor Freight, and this will outlast any of us many, many times over. It's really high quality steel, and it's really heavy. I'll pass this around after I'm done using it. But it also comes with a nice like wooden block to set in. What a doming block historically is used for, if you're into metal forging or anything like that, and you were going to make a big like copper ladle or something, and you wanted a nice curve, instead of hammering that curve out by hand, you could take a big wooden cookie, like an end grain piece of wood, carve a dish in it, and then that would be your doming block, and you would take that thin sheet of copper, hammer it to the shape of the dish, and now you have a pretty good ladle or spoon. Buttons, things like that are historically made with these doming blocks. Now they've devolved to making spin tops, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to take my penny, and let's say we use Abe Lincoln's face as, because it's a cool president, right? We're going to use that as the surface that's going to be convex, right? And we'll put that face down on my doming block. I want to keep this as centered as possible, and I'll take the biggest punch that I have here. These are sized in numbers. This is 24. It's probably 7/8 of an inch or so in diameter. That's not that important as long as you have the relative size right here. So I have this concavity that's way bigger than my penny, and it's relatively a gentle curve. I'll take my biggest punch, try to center my punch in the center of my penny. My penny is centered as much as possible, and I'll give it a couple hits. And you could hear the sound change when that penny contacts the bottom of the doming block. Let's see. So it's really high at first, and then when I hit it a little harder and it settles down, it goes deeper. So there was that pitch change, and that lets me know that my penny has the same profile as that concavity. Now this is pretty, it's not crucial right now, but it's pretty shallow. So I want to make something that's a little bit more prominent, so my spin top sits up, right? So we're going to take this, we're going to move it to the next smallest cavity, put this in, center it as best as we can. We'll take that same punch, right, hammer it a little bit. Now with that, you can kind of hear like that sound changed pretty early. So what that tells me, and I've done this quite a bit now, is that if I hear that sound within the first couple of hits, that means that maybe the side of my penny is contacting instead of the bottom or the apex of that penny. So I'll just go to a smaller punch and do that same thing. And now it's probably, since it's smaller than what I was using before by a couple of sizes, this is a 22, I start to make this more prominent, and it's pretty much the same profile as that next concavity, right? We can go to the next smallest one, and I'll save you the grief by just going down to another small punch. One of the things with this is if we have something that's a coin that's going to have all these little contours in it, and it's not going to spin as good as something that's totally smooth. So to give ourselves the best chance of having something that spins decently, we want to make sure that that apex is right in the center of our coin. If we get off to the side, like our penny slips on us and we start hammering and it's on the side, that dome is going to be off to the left or to the right. And we're going to get a spin that's really bad. But if that happens, you can just reset your penny in your concavity, hammer it to compensate for that dome being in the wrong spots, and get it back to center pretty easily. Right? So here, we're just punching this down. Right? And then, this, when I'm looking at it, I'm just checking it out in multiple directions just to make sure that that dome is in the center. And we'll go one more, right, to the next smallest setting and punch it down. Right. Sometimes you'll get something funky where the penny looks like it's a little bit wonky, like maybe you accidentally hit one side of the penny, it's a little flat. What you can do is just go back to a bigger punch, hammer it down, and that's going to flatten out the sides and keep everything nice and smooth. So now we have this penny that's domed pretty well. It's pretty smooth. You can still see Abe Lincoln's face, and it'll spin, well enough. Right? So we need to inset this penny into our block of wood. Now, if I just glued it right here, that's not great, because all I would have is this, like CA or epoxy glue connection between a penny and a relatively flat piece of end grain wood that's not going to hold for very long. So we need to do a couple things to this, and I'll pass this doming block around so you can check it out. It's a nice piece of metal, good for home invaders as well. So we've got that. Hopefully it never has to be used for that. We've got our penny, and we have our, oops, there's the penny that we use. And I'll pass this around too. So what we'll do with this lid so that the penny is permanent, right? I'll pass around this penny, and I'll pass around a penny that has a plug of wood glued into it. So as we're insetting this, we're going to make a little dome of wood that matches the concave portion of the penny. So if we put CA glue, that's what we'll use, thick CA glue, on the inside of this penny and flatten it against a dome with a similar profile, you have a nice big amount of surface area, wood, CA glue, penny. And then we're also going to create a little wood clamp by doing some little delicate, precise turning here, right? And then when all is said and done, we'll have a penny that's sitting out like this, and we'll be able to use it as a spin bearing, right? So first, I'm going to take my skew and make a little, this is kind of like making a lid. We want to sneak up on the fit. So I'm going to take my skew, scribe a little line that I know is quite a bit too small for my penny, and just double check it, right, to make sure I didn't make one too big. If if you make your lid too small, it's going to be really loose. If I make this line too big and I hollow it out, my penny is going to jiggle around and it's not going to be, a tight fit. So I know that's too small, and I'm just looking at it, and it's probably about 3.5 millimeters or 4 millimeters too small in diameter. So I can just sneak up on it a little bit, right? All right, make another little line, check my penny again, and what I'm looking for is like it kind of slots in. So, you can't hear this really well. You can hear that little snap, right? So that's where that penny, it started out flat, and when we make it concave, right? So imagine this flat surface turning up, right? And flip it over. We have this sharp lip on the outside of the penny, and if we make a little line that's scribed perfectly, you get a little snap fit where it slots in really well. So I know that second line, usually it takes 3. You guys must be a good audience or something. Fits really well, but we haven't made a dome. We haven't made a little wood clamp, if you want to call it that. So all I have is a reference line for how wide of a diameter I want to make this little recess. But that's the hardest part. Well, sort of the hardest part. So now I've got this line. I'm just going to take my skew, and I'm just going to rock it to the side, right? And I want to make sure that I don't make my recess any wider than the incised line, right? By doing this just smooth rocking motion, I'm creating that domed profile. And we're just kind of guesstimating it, that it's going to be roughly the same profile as the inside of our penny. All right, we're going to rock it down and do this. And now we have a little recess with a dome at the bottom. All right, so we're going to check this again, and it might be a little bit small, and that's all right. Right? So I have this. My penny still slots in where it was, but it can't fit in. Right? So this is a good spot right here. Now we need to just widen this a hair, and we're going to undercut the side a little bit. Right? So when I do that, by making it just a tiny, tiny little bit wider, right? We'll just take our skew and move it to the side. All right. Then I'll take my spindle gouge, which this is where that nice aggressive profile comes in. If you can see that, I grind it so that it has these really long wings, and it looks like this, this really acute triangle, right? But it gives me a nice detail tip. So I can take that spindle gouge, can take that tip in, hold it flat so my flute is completely closed. I'm just pushing that sharpened tip in and undercutting the edge of that recess that we made. So now I have this recess. Instead of having flat walls, it flares out on the inside. Right? And we've sized this right. And now if we take our penny and put this right here, like our penny almost fits in. I can fit one side in and it kind of sinks. That's where I want it to be, because we want to force this penny past that smaller diameter lip into the flared section on the inside. And wood fibers, what do they do when you compress them? They move out of the way and then they swell back up. So this wood clamp idea is that if we have this undercut recess, I shove my penny in, not only is it going to be supported by the CA glue, but that wood is going to come over the top edge of it and hold it in place and keep it really centered and keep it really secure. Right? CA glue alone is probably good enough, but you let the wood do the work for you. That's great. So let's take this off, and so I don't use specialized tools very much in a demo. I have one today, specialized tool, and if you really like this demo, I'll sell it to you for $50. It's yours. I'm just joking about that. I'm not hawking anything to you guys, but I made this little piece of wood because I would, take this, and I want to take the chuck off to give myself the best chance of centering this penny down, and so I'll put the penny down and I'll hammer it, right? But if I just take my little hammer right here, I've worked so hard to get a nice shape on my penny. If I take my hammer and hammer it exactly, I'm going to flatten it. That's even more problematic, like I said, with a dime that's thinner. So I figured the best way to do that is use a piece of soft wood, right, to do that. But even better than that is if you can take a piece of soft wood that has a little concave end in it, I can take this, hammer it down, and even if I use a lot of force, I'm not going to be touching the center of that penny, right? So this is a piece of poplar. It's super, super soft, and it's not going to dent my penny, right? So I need to take a drop of thick CA glue. I use thick because it can sort of work as a gap filler, and it's not going to soak into the fibers like a thin, especially a thin or a medium. I'll put a pretty nice glob of glue here. Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We don't have it.
You have cottonwood, right? Yeah.
Popular salt.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not cottonwood, it's a poplar.
Oh, right, yeah.
It's not tulip poplar.
Well, that's why my price is high on this, $50, because it's an exotic for you guys. No, it's funny. We have a lot of tulip poplar. Tulip trees are really cool. If you haven't been, if you've never really explored the woods of the Southeast, there are a couple of old growth forests, and there's this one in North Carolina called the Joyce Kilmer National Memorial Forest, and it's one of the few old growth stands of tulip poplars that you can find around. And I've been there a couple times, and you can find these massive, they're not as nice as like the sequoia and redwood you guys have here, but you can still find a tree with like a 10-foot diameter, at chest level, and it's pretty rare in the Southeast. And tulip poplars are beautiful trees. I love the leaves. So we've got this big glob of CA glue. You can use quite a bit because when you have this wood clamp, the glue is not going to come out. It's just going to spread throughout here. So I just put my penny in place, take my specialized tool, and hammer it down until I hear that same flat sound. And I can look at it and I see that my fibers have come back up over the top of my penny. It's centered, and that glue is going to cure in time. It's sealed, so we can put it on the lathe and not use an accelerator or anything that's going to stink for you guys. Right. So that's one of the two stressful parts done, like the real precision parts done. The other one is just making sure we have a nice fit to our lid. And I've got a good mistake box that I'll show you what not to do. Right. So I've got this in place. If you wanted to go back, if I'm looking at this, maybe this is just a little bit shallow, so I want my spin bearing to be a little bit more prominent, or let my spin top have a little bit more rise. Well, I can just go in and, this is held in place really well. Take my spindle gouge or my scraper, right? Right. And then I'll just, get as close as I can to the penny. I don't want to touch the penny because, one of the benefits of using these older pennies, not only do they hammer and shape well, but they have cool patinas, and that's part of the fun of old coins is they have nice patinas. So if I touch the penny, I'm going to get this nice, shiny, bright ring, and it's cool and shiny, right? It's going to ruin the look of the penny. So you want to make sure that if you are going back and shaping this profile a little bit more, you don't touch your penny. And you can do this until you have it right. Again, if you're satisfied with the curve, whatever. If you do have a little bit of glue squeeze out, you can always address that as well with with your scraper on edge. Just be careful that you don't touch the penny. Or if you're, if CA glue, you can just clean it off pretty easily. Sometimes I'll use epoxy for these if it's a little bit bigger, but you'll find that there's really not much of a difference in how it works with epoxy and CA glue for this purpose, because we do have that wood clamp. All right, so now let's try to think about the fit of our lid. Now, we could have gone about this process differently. I could have sized my lid first and then worried about the penny, but there are more things that can go wrong with the penny, so I try to start with that, get that finished, and then to make a nice sized lid, you can be really conservative and sneak up on it, right? Wood turners love to impress other wood turners with their lid fits. It's almost as nice as impressing other wood turners with their thin walls, right? And usually the only people you impress are other wood turners. So if you've ever sold boxes at a craft show, what's the worst thing that can happen? You have somebody that really likes the box, they lift it up by the stem or the pull or finial, whatever you want to call it, and it's like a nice fit-ish, and they lift it up and the box falls on the ground, and you didn't have a you break it, you buy it sign, so you're stuck with the broken piece, right? So what I like to do is make generally a little bit of a looser fit for this. So like this box right here, I can lift up my lid and it's not going to stick at all. It's a relatively small foot, so I don't want there to be a wobble, in case it would fall down. But if I have a looser fit, right, there's no problem with that. That might not be as sexy to a wood turner if it's a looser fit though, right? Now if I make a tight fit, this is a really nice fit. However, it's too tight, and the profile of this box is such that we don't have a lip for our lid. We're relying purely on that pull to get our lid out. And I made this as a demo for my own club, which is great. I made it too tight because I'm like, oh, it's my hometown. I have to make a really good fit. It was so tight, I even glued on my finial. I couldn't get the lid out, so I had to just chisel it off, and it was kind of fun. But I like to pass this around because it's it's really nice tight fit, and if you can get the lid off with your fingers, you can have this crappy chiseled box. And I'll make another bad one to use for later on. But that would be like, it's too tight. It's it's good. You can get a really nice grain match, seamless if it was lined up, but it's just not functional, right? So for something like this, that it's a box, it should hold things if you want it to hold things, and it's a spin top, you should be able to spin it. I need to focus on functionality. So I'll make something like a loose, tight fit where it's, for you guys, try to make like a piston fit sort of thing that is going to give me support when I jam my body on it. I'll use a little bit of tape, but it's not going to be so tight that I can't get it off in the end. Right. So let's do that. We've got our spin top bottom finished. We need to make a lid. We've got our body right here. And we can take our calipers that I'm borrowing from Rock Creek again. These are really nice calipers. Mine are terrible, so it kind of works out better than I forgot them because these are way better than mine. And I can use these inner diameter jaws and just open them a little bit, right, to give myself some wiggle room. Right, and then I'll just use these to make a sizing cut for a lid that's too big. Right, it's not going to fit in, and then we'll sneak up on it. Right. So sizing cut, again, basic skill that if you're new to turning, might be a little bit intimidating for the same reason as sizing your tenon with the sharp inner jaws of your calipers. But if you have these calipers, you set them at whatever distance you want. And there's a digital readout on these, but let's see. Mine aren't digital, so I can't read numbers very well. So let's say this is about 60 millimeters or so. Right, I can use my parting tool, make a little groove for this to sit in, right? And then I can just make a light parting cut, and when my calipers fall down, whoops, I'm coming off center. These are a little bit sharper, so they're kind of nice. But when my calipers fall down, I know that tenon that I'm making, right, is the size that matches my calipers, right? These are almost too nice. So, coming off of those. I'm used to my cheap ones that are bent, right? It's the haze. That's what it is. So we can do this. We can also, just kind of estimate it. I don't want to push this on right now. And I see that I made this a little bit too small, but that's all right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a little bit more prominent top, and I'll use my parting tool. make something that should be too big. It's fun when you get to correct your mistakes in front of a crowd, right? I love that, yeah. So we've got this. This is too big. That's good. We'll just we'll quickly blend this in with our scraper. It's really no big deal, right? Do this. It's always better to make a mistake on the front ends, right? We just get to make a nice, more prominent, nice, better, more beautiful OG curve, right? That comes out to a flat right here. And it shouldn't really affect the spin quality. This isn't too much different, right? We'll flatten out a little bit. Right. And now we'll sneak up on our fits. You can use your calipers, but clearly those aren't in my favor right now. So we'll just do it a little bit less interesting, and we'll just sneak up on our fit using our little parting tool. Just go slowly. One thing you can do if you're using like precious wood for this, you can just maybe make a little like 16th inch tenon, right, to get your size, and then use that as a reference to deepen it a little bit, right? So we're just a little bit off. What we want with this is, sometimes like a trick to getting a nice lid fit is to taper it a little bit so it comes down and it fits right at the top. I want a 90-degree edge right here. If this is 90 degrees, I want that 90 degrees because we're going to cut off a little bit of our top, and I don't want a seam showing. If this was tapered and I cut off the top of my taper, now I'm going to have a big gap right in between my lid and my box, right? And I don't want that. So I want to make sure that this is as flat as possible, right? And let's just check it. And it's pretty close. All right, we'll do a little bit more. A little bit more. And at this point, you're just kind of like, you're imagining the shavings coming off, right? They're wisps of shavings, like dust coming off. And you get to a point where you start to, I know I have this nice 90-degree surface. It's mating one. It makes a nice like DJ sound. Right? But it's still not setting in. So I need to cut it a little bit more. And I'm just taking my time. I know this is not the most glamorous thing to watch. But I'll get to the point when I remove a little bit more that I can sort of start to fit my lid in halfway, and it'll start to sink. Right, so I have a little bit more. And, it's like, I forget, I watched the demo. I went to SWAT for the first time this year, and it was really cool. Like, as cool as the Rocky Mountain Symposium is for the West, SWAT is like that for the South. And somebody did a demo, and they really spoke to me because they're like, I'm going to cut one more time, and that'll be a lie. It'll be 10 more times, right? So it's like every time I feel like I'm trying to sneak up on a lid cut, like, this is the one. And it's not, but it's really close. I can almost slot that lid in. But it's worth it to take the time to make a good fit. Right. Also, I apparently have 4 hours to fill with you guys, so this is a great way to do that without removing a whole lot of wood. Right? It's not right. That's not right. So really, really close. One more with an asterisk. I think it'll be good. All right. If I would have just remembered my terrible calipers, we'd already be done by now. I'm not used to using such high quality equipment. Right. All right. Okay, that's right there. So now I could force this on and it'd be a really tight fit, like that box that's going around. But I don't want to do that. One, like I want to be able to get my lid off, and two, like if I force this on, like this is, it's not super thin, but it's end grain, so if I force it on, it's going to crack it. Right? It'll be really nice and secure, but it'll be cracked, right? And I don't want that. I'm all right with dealing with cracks sometimes, but if it's because I made a mistake and cracked the wood by being stupid, that's when it goes into the fancy firewood pile, and I don't feel bad about that at all, right? unless it's, a really nice piece of wood, then I feel bad for wasting it. Right, okay, so now we have a good fit. It's loose, like I don't really have any wiggle room, right? It has a nice sound to it, but it's not tight, right? So I know this is a good fit. It's loose enough to not fall off the bench or get stuck, but it's nice, right? So we've got this. I also made the tenon a little bit deep, so there's a little bit of a gap. I don't know if you can see that from this camera, maybe in the overhead. There's a little bit of a gap between my body and where this bigger shoulder is. And that's what I want. I want to make sure that that tenon right here is deeper than I need, because we're going to cut all this off anyway, right? If it was too shallow, right, I couldn't tell that my my top was bottoming out, right? So I know that having a gap here tells me that my spin top is sitting on my shoulder and, and not just floating, right? So I've got this. That's good. Now we'll check up the body right now and finish off with the lid. Usually what I do is I would make a little reference line with my pencil, especially for this if you're taking something out of a chuck and putting it back in, right? But much like forgetting my sock, I forgot to do that. So let's just hope it's running pretty true. That's not too bad. So we've got this, and what I want to do now is I want to finish off my lid, right? So I'll put this in, and what I'm going to do is just going to bring up my tailstock, give myself some pressure. So this is in the same orientation that we started out with, so I still have that registration mark where my live center is at. Put this in. I have nice tailstock support right now. I'll give it a little push. Well, I don't want to crank down on this. Right? We just need it to hold it in place. Yes, sir. Usually, it's not really crucial right now. If I was doing like a side grain version of this and there was the chance where it would have warped a little bit, then I would be really cognizant of that. But this, it doesn't really matter too much. Sometimes I will, just if I'm being anal about it. But functionally, it's not going to make a difference right here. Right. So I will take my spindle gouge, and I'm going to start making this top profile. And first, we'll just cut some corners off. We'll lower this. Anytime you mess with your tool rest while the lathe is running, just be really aware of where it is. All right. We'll cut off our corners. We don't need that tenon anymore. And if we do, well, it's already gone, so not even worry about it. All right, so we're doing this. Now you can see that maybe even with that, this gap is prominent right here. So I'm just going to keep removing wood. Right? Not being too careful with, rate of tool speed or anything like that, because we're going to make some fine cuts to finish this off. So now we've got this gap. We want to get rid of that. And what I'll do is I'll start maybe just, I don't know it'd be like 1/2 millimeter down from the lip of my box. And if you looked at this profile of these boxes around, the top is convex like this, and that curve continues to the side of the box, right? So where the lip of the box is, it's continuing the curve, right? So that means I came down, in this case, about 1 millimeter or so from the top of the box, so I'd have this nice continuous curve. That's also why you don't want to make your top fit too tightly, because there's nothing to grab onto, right? So I can take this, take my spindle gouge, start making a nice curve, right? See, there's still a little bit of a lip right there. So I'll just move a little bit further down. And now we started to take off that lip. But now I'm looking at it, and like I've started this nice curve, and it kind of bulges out, right? So I want to make it a little bit more shallow, right? Right? So I'll do that, slow down my tool, right? Close it a little bit, drop my handle. Now I'm getting a nice surface quality. I have this nice dome that I'm starting, and it goes all the way to this crisp edge, and that's what you want, right? So now I can take off a little bit more material here. Do this. And when I get to that little ridge, I just pick up my cut. And, again, you want to make sure you don't have any flat spots, you don't have any dips. I can see there's just a tiny little bulge right there. Right? So I can just rub my bevel lightly. I don't want to bruise the wood. Open up my tool a little bit, come around, close it again. Right? And now I have this curve that's nice and continuous. We'll do one more round of that. I don't want to completely part this away. Not quite yet. Right. We'll just pick up that cut. And one more little pickup. Do that. And now we have this pretty nice curve. We can do, there's a tiny little flat spot, so we can do one more. This is that one more cut that's going to blow it up, right? We do one more cut. The profile, we took care of that little flat spot. We're coming in, and now we have a better curve right there. There's a little bit of a bruise, but I'm not too concerned with that. You can always take your round nose scraper, clean it up. You take some sandpaper, clean it up, right? The most important thing here is that, one, you should have a good fit, and two, you have this continuous curve from the lip to the top, right? And there's always another opportunity to clean off. So now what we have here is just a little cone that's left, and we need to get rid of that. So this is where I will match up my grain a little bit more. And let's see where that is, and I flip it around like this. I think it's like that. There we go. It was right. There we go. So we've got this, and it's a nice, easy fit, right? But if I take off my tail slack support, since it's not super tight, right, it's just going to go flying off. So for you guys, I'll use a little bit of this expensive tape. Won't tell my wife, though. It's my kid's college fund right here. I have two toddlers at home, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I love them. I'll preface this by saying I love them more than anything. They are the best thing that has happened to me. My wife as well. I love my family, but it is also nice to come out here and have a little. I've slept in until I woke up at 6, but I laid in bed until 7 this morning without being interrupted. Like, my gosh, what a luxury. So it's cool to be here and do this and hang out. My wife just rolls her eyes when I talk wood turning also. So I'm like indulging myself in multiple ways. Right, so for you guys, for entertaining me, I'll use some tape. So we've got a little bit of tape on here, and that's just so we can free up our tail stock because we need to drill a little bit of a hole that's going to accept the tenon that we make on our stem. And we will just use our spindle gouge again. I'll lower my speed a little bit. Right. There's a little bit of a wobble. That's all right. And we'll just make some gingerly cuts. All right. We don't have to be, too careful at this point. If you're just hogging out, you might rip some fibers, and that wouldn't be that great. But we could just put our tool, close that flute, and then just continue that curve all the way to the center. I have a little bit of a nubbin, and even if you have this tiny little lip right here, you can get rid of it, but the collar on our stem is going to cover this anyway. So we've continued our curve. It is just a little bit not quite flat, so it's a really, really gentle curve. I'll take my skew, make a little divot in the center, right, because we'll use a 1/4-inch Forstner bit to just drill a 1/4-inch deep hole. That's going to accept a little tenon, right? So we'll take our speed down to about 600 or so. Sometimes, I twist this out and I feel like I'm Tom Worsingstrong doing that. A lot of times it doesn't work, right? I don't know. You're a big guy, Tom. I don't know you that well, but you look stout. It's a compliment. It's a compliment. And I'm going to grab this. See? So we'll take this standard bit out. I'll put in my 1/4-inch Forstner bits right here. And then the nice thing about this 1/4-inch Forstner bit is my flutes are about a 1/4 inch deep, or 1/4 inch long, and I want to make a 1/4 inch deep hole so I don't have to worry about using my pencil or wasting any more tape. I can just drill until I'm at the bottom of my flutes. We'll do that. We don't really have to worry too much about it. It's cherry. You guys don't have cherry here, do you? I'm just joking. I'm joking. Yeah, not very much. It's a little bit on the softer side. Actually, I make a joke, but I bought this on eBay from a guy that makes makes spindle blanks for tables and sells seconds for really cheap. It's a little bit softer than high quality Tennessee cherry. This is just a joke. But it's soft enough to, you can just drive that bit in. It's really small. So now we've got everything set. We're good here. We're finished with this. We just need to turn off the end of our bottom, and then we'll make a finial for the last step, and that'll go pretty quickly. This is where, with that mistake box that I passed around, where I went awry, because it was so tight. Now I have nothing to grip on, right? And what I want is that loose, tight fit that should pop out if I just have a little piece of tape attached to it, right? So there wasn't much wobble, comes out really easily without being able to grab it, and we've got a little flying saucer right here we'll set aside for now. Now we need to make a little jam chuck, and we have just a lot of material. I'll go a little bit faster than I did last time. You can use a little taper trick for this one. What I'll do is take my parting tool, move this a little bit closer, bring this up. So remember, I left that little V groove between the bottom of my box. So now I'm parting, right, just where the bottom of my box is. I'll get rid of most of the material. I want to be kind of careful here, because this being end grain, if you're aggressive with your parting tool, right here, you could twist out some fibers, and then even leaving that 1/2 inch material, it could pull these really long fibers, and I have a funnel anyway, right? So I'll just be conservative. I'll use a little flush cut saw to cut this off. And now we have our little box that we just want to turn around, and we'll jam on here and make a concave portion that'll go pretty quickly. So with this, we can, we'll just take our calipers, and we'll do this the faster way. Right? This should still be set for a little bit wider than the inside. Always double check that, double, triple check. And then here, take my calipers, I'll just scribe a little line. All right. I know this little line is going to be too big, but I can sneak up on it. I can make a little taper, and I'll just use my skew for that. Just make some peeling cuts. And I'll true this up because it's, I want it to run sort of smooth. All right. Like this. I'm to my line right now. I'll start tapering it, and I'll just continue that taper like this. So now I have this cone that's, it's going to be too big. Maybe it's a little bit too big. We'll just decrease that diameter a bit. It's certainly not going to fit all the way, but if I stick my box on, right, I need to go a little bit more. We'll get a little burnish mark, and that'll be a good reference for how much material we need to take off. So I just increase the steepness of that cone. Put my box on right here, twist it a little bit, and now I have a little line that tells me what a good fit should be. Right? So now I can just take off material to that line, taper that a little bit as well. Make sure my shoulder is nice and flat. See how that fits. And again, same rule applies for this jam chuck. If I have this taper, I know I can shove this in, but then I'm going to crack my box. So I want it to be a tight fit, and I want that that shoulder, or the top of my box, to sit on this shoulder. Right, so I'm really close. I'll do just one more cut, and check this out. Got another burnish mark right there. And I can just take off a little bit more material. And you can always, if you go just slightly too small, you can just stick a paper towel or shop towel in and call it good. All right, so that's, nice. We'll still use some tape to keep it stable. But it's jammed on there pretty nicely, and we'll be able to just make a few gingerly cuts and finish off that bottom. What's that? No, gosh. That's not plenty of people to beg from, right? All right, actually, I was doing a demo or doing a workshop on this in Georgia once, and I had made a lot of these, and when I was a kid, I had this Folgers jar of coins that I would collect, and I'm having a lot of pennies, and I think in my early college days, like a poor broke college student, I think I traded all of those in for like pizza money or something dumb. You have to eat. But I forgot about it, and I was like, well, I have a whole Folgers can. I need more of these old pennies. I couldn't find it, and then I remembered. I think I had sold it or went to a Coinstar or something like that. Well, the guy I was staying with, I was like, I bet I have a little. So he had his own Folgers can, and we had like the night before the workshop a little session where he gave me a bunch of just golden old pennies, and I have a whole sack of them. So I'll spend $1 on this. I've got plenty of pennies to make up with that. So now I've got this that is stuck on there. It's tight, and we'll just make some light cuts to cut off that little nubbin and make a nice concave bottom. It's just a little bit closer, so just be careful with that. Even though it's a good fit and we have tape, we still want to be pretty light with this. We're pressing toward the center right here. Right, so it's not pressing anything toward the tail side. We can rub our bevel and press against that at the same time, right? But that just gives us a little bit less tool control. So now I've got a flat on the bottom. I'm gonna make it a little bit concave. I just open my spindle gouge, roll my body, do that a little bit more. Can try not to take off so much material. You make a funnel at the very last step. All right. We want it to be concave enough to where that penny seats in the middle. But you don't want it to be so concave and steep-walled that the body of the penny rubs, because then it's not going to spin at all. All right, so just be real careful with this. Make a couple light cuts. One more should do it. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll take my spindle gouge, roll it over, and make a little bit of a lip on the bottom, and try not to skid across there. And that just helps the spin top get shouldered against the lip. All right, so that should be good enough. It's really not that great, but again, pull out your friend, the round nose scraper, and clean that up. It should be all right. And it's not the cleanest surface, but that's okay. So we've got this. We've got our box finished. Now we just need to make our stem. And what time is it? I was just a joke going for 4 hours. 8 o'clock. All right. And so I'll do this pretty quickly. Got this. That's set up. I'll set that right there. My lid fits. And there are a lot of ways you can go about making a little finial for this or spin top stem. Just like anything else, a lot of work holding methods you can use. One thing that I like to do is I'll just make like a little Morse taper. And I had planned on doing that just in case if I was running out of time, I could do that. I had a little example to pass around, but that went somewhere. But if you have a little short piece of wood, you can just turn a Morse taper on the end, stick it in the spindle, and it's fun, very useful practice if you just want to drive something without having like pen jaws or whatever. But for the sake of time, we'll just take this little piece of wood. Right? It is too small to hold in these standard chuck jaws, but it's small enough to where I can just clamp it between the check plates. Right. Oh, here's the little Morse taper up here. What's the phrase? It was a snake, it would have bit me in my punch box. So I'll pass this around. This is kind of a fun thing. And This is nice if you're making like wands or something like that. You can make a Morse taper on the end of the wand, and if you're doing something where it like has a carving element, but you need to take it off and put it back in, it'll self-center in the spindle, and you don't have to worry about having this weird work holding thing with that. But it's useful for a lot of things as well. Morse tapers are like magic of our world, right? Making one in wood, that's even better, and they're really easy to make with calipers, but it's a little bit of a process. So instead of doing that, we'll just do it like this and hold our little piece of wood. This isn't Bacote, it's just another piece of wood that's a little bit softer. I got it in a grab bin, and I think it's like a little piece of I'm not sure what it is. It's really hard and dense. It looks like hickory, but I know that's not what it is. It has this little open grain structure to it, but it'll work out perfectly for us. So what we want to do is just round it first, and we'll just use whatever tool you have. We'll be gingerly with this. All right. Even though it's being clamped in our chuck jaws, right? It's not the most stable work holding. It's not going to fly out, right? But any sort of aggressive movements will get a little bit of movement in our blank, right? So we'll do this, and we'll take our little calipers right here. I'm going to make a nice shoulder for making a sizing cut. Now my hole, the recess that I made on my spin top lid was a 1/4 inch deep, and it's a 1/4 inch diameter. So I want to make sure that I have a tenon that is a 1/4 inch diameter, or maybe just a hair underneath, so those fibers will swell up with some glue. And instead of referencing that hole that I made, I'll just reference my drill bit. Like always use the same template, always reference the same thing right here. So I drilled a hole, put this in, I'll open it or close it very, very, very slightly, just like a hair's width, and that prevents everything from getting stuck. And then I'll take my skew, and this one, right, I'll make a little sizing cut right here. One thing you can do with these have really sharp points on them. They're really nice, high quality, but if you find that you're skipping a lot like this, you can just take a little bit of sandpaper and around the edges. Another little trick, if you find that you're just getting a little bit frustrated, what you can do is you can make a tiny, tiny little hole right here. Now I have a reference for what 1/4 inch is. I can use my skew or parting tool, and I can meet that 1/4 inch as well. Like if you don't have calipers, this is a quick way to, you don't have calipers but you got a drill bit, quick way to get a size that is good. Right. So we'll take this, we've got our 1/4 inch diameter tenon. We're going to turn a little bit off of it because it's a little bit long. Right. Chamfer the edge a little bit, do a quick little test fit to make sure it is all right. Right, so it's a little bit tight, but not too tight. It spins on really well. And the last thing we're going to do, we made this spin top lid with a slight dome on the top. If I have a flat shoulder right here and a dome right here, I put this so that the tenon is fully seated, there's going to be a little bit of a gap. So I need to undercut the bottom of this, which will be the collar, just very, very slightly, so that I match that dome profile. Right. So instead of having a flat, I just undercut this very, very, very slightly with my spindle gouge or whatever tool you want to use. Right. Not so much that it's really going to affect the length of the tenon. Also, sometimes I'll make a little groove at the top of the tenons just to allow excess glue to fill that groove instead of spitting on the top of your lid. And then one more test. All right, do that. I put this on fully seated, and there's no gap, which is good. So we know I have a tenon that fits. We know that we've undercut it enough for there not to be a gap. Now we just need to make something that looks okay. And needs to be sized appropriately, right? So the last thing I'll talk about as far, before I finish this is if you have something like this might be it's not bad proportions. It's still maybe a little bit of a powerful finial or tenon, but as a spin top, especially with something where we want to keep the center of gravity really low, having this really long, relatively thick spin top stem makes this quite unstable. It's top heavy, and if you spin it, it wobbles quite a bit. So a good rule of thumb with this is the smaller the better. There's a certain point where it's too small and you can't get a good spinning action, but something like this little box that has this little simple spin top spins really well because there's not a whole lot of mass sitting on top of the top. Right? How many times can we say top in a few sentences, right? Yeah, can't top that. There we go. I love it. I'll steal that joke now. Stuart, I'll give you credit for it. All right, so now we want to make a little collar, and for this, simpler the better. If we're making a nice finial, then maybe we would want to add these embellished elements, beads and coves and whatever. But for this, focusing on functionality, we want to make sure the size is appropriate, but we also want to make something that looks decent. So I'll make a little shadow line by chamfering the bottom of this collar, right? And then we will, and then we can take down the diameter of this a little bit, so it's a little bit lighter. Make another chamfer line, and then let's just say it's relatively short, so we'll make a little reference line right here, right? And we'll cut this down. Just making these rough cuts. Do what? Oh yeah. Well, I should have said that this is the cousin of poplar. So it's true. No, I'm just kidding. We're making one of those inverse Christmas trees, right? So we're just removing wood here, and we'll get some nice cuts in just a second. So with this collar, make a nice little curve. Get cramped. Always, fill in with the other hand. It's a little bit more comfortable, right? So now we have this nice thin collar. It's crisp. The part that I care about is not super stringy. And then we'll take this down, and we'll make just a nice simple curve. Going to this, we'll try to make a nice crisp transition from that collar to our curve, just to give it a nice sharp element. Like a little OG on the top of this, right? And then match that down to the bottom, just rolling your tool over, lifting the handle, and then we have that nice cuts. Thin this down a little bit, get rid of some material. This, and we'll make one cut that goes from here down to the bottom. Cut that off, turn it on its side. Make it crisp. And then we can just finish off the top, and it should spin. Okay, now like I said, the last thing we want to see is if we can spin this on the top of our box, then we've really made what we intended to make. If we can't, then at best we can give it a B or maybe a C, But if it works, then we'll be happy. I already got my check too, so it's very low pressure. I don't understand why they pay these demonstrators before they finish. You guys trust me a lot. That's great. All right, so we'll smooth this out a little bit. There we go. Oh yeah, that's right. I still have a class to do too. Yeah, oh man. So I was staying with a board member, so I really have no say in it. We locked in the basement at night, so it's fine. Yeah, in addition to bringing me a Chuck, driving me around, thanks Margaret and Keith for hosting me as well. It's really, really nice. Good people. All right, so we'll do this, and I've got something that's okay, little elegant potato shape, and I like potatoes, so I'm all right with that. And it's pretty small; it should spin okay. And we'll just make one last little cut to part it off. Well, maybe one more cut this way, and with that. got this. Last thing is we will just, there's a little tiny nubbin. You can clean that off with some sandpaper or take a little bit more care when finishing it, but that's all right. So we'll just add a little drop of CA glue to the tenon. We made that tiny little recess at the bottom of the collar. It's a little bit concave, so again, any excess glue is going to fill that space between the collar, and it's not going to seep out. It shouldn't seep out on the top of your spin top, right? And this is where you really don't want it to seep out because it's going to soak into those end grain fibers, and it's going to be hard to clean up if it did. So push that in. One thing I like to think about when I'm doing this is where I will also line up the grain to where the grain of whatever I'm using for the top runs parallel to whatever I'm using for the spin stem, right? And it's just a nice little, somebody might notice that. Like, hey, cool, did you mean to do that? You could say, yeah, for once I did. So we've got something that, it might spin, okay, like this. And yeah, take my word for it, it did spin, all right. So let's see if it actually works right here. Spin it around, I give myself a second chance, and it spins, wobbles a little bit, and it should stop. Cool. So do you guys have any questions for me? Cool. Thanks for bearing with me. I know I talk a lot during these things. Again, my wife doesn't like to hear it, so you guys are entertaining for me. If you do want to make one of these and you forget the steps, I know it's hard to remember everything in a demo. I've got some business cards with my contact information, or if you don't get a card, you can reach out to a number of people here, and if you do make one, though, what I want to ask you is send me a picture because I love seeing that. But otherwise, you guys are great. If you're coming to my class tomorrow, I'll see you there. We'll do something totally different than this. Otherwise, you guys, drive safely tonight. And thank you.